All right, folks. So the first thing we've got to do before we begin the viewer's guide, before we begin the fabulous video, is to locate where they were leaving from and where they were going in the video. So if you look uh, on this page, the name of it is Map of Migration Routes Followed by African Americans During the Great Migration. Okay, and if you look at the little caption here, between 1910 and 1930, more than 1 million African Americans moved out of the South to cities in the North, Midwest, and West. They sought economic opportunity, which was kind of a pull factor. They sought freedom from racial segregation, which was a push factor, safety from lynching and other kinds of racist violence, a push factor. So if you look at the map here, all right, this is kind of as big as I think I can make it without cutting off some of it. Let me try and make it a little bit bigger and see, not 1% bigger, and see if it becomes, no, that's okay. So if you look at this map here and you look at MS, which as you should know is the state of Mississippi, all right, that's where we, in this video, where Robert and Clara begin their journey, all right, from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, right down here, and they go straight up to Chicago, Illinois. Okay, now looking at this map, you can see the wide range of places where African Americans began and also where they wound up. I mean, they literally, every single southern state saw a great migration, all right, from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, DC, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. And if I forgot Georgia, there's Georgia. If I said it already, I'll say it twice. All right. And there's a long list of cities up north. That was their destination, other than what this video depicts. Again, you have Minneapolis, you have Milwaukee, you have in Detroit, you have Michigan, Toledo, you have Indianapolis, St. Louis, all right, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Newark, Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, Boston, New Haven, New York City, Philly, and even some to Baltimore and DC and Richmond. Okay, those that were coming from deeper south. All right, and a later Great Migration that brought African Americans to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland. All right. So those are the major cities, major states where African Americans left, and major cities in which they found themselves. So let's get to page 1 in the viewer's guide. I'm going to scroll back up to page 1. Scroll past this. All right, page 1. Why did Robert Horton and Clara Robinson join the Great Migration? In the early decades of the 20th century, hundreds of thousands of African Americans left the rural South and traveled hundreds of miles to make new homes for themselves in northern cities. The Great Migration continued for decades and eventually involved millions of people, becoming the largest internal migration in American history. That's a very important fact to remember. In Up South, the fabulous video, Clara Robinson and Robert Horton represent the ordinary people who helped lead a movement that transformed African American life and shaped 20th century American history. Up South explores this important event from Robert and Clara's point of view. It looks at the communities and traditions African Americans built in the South after the Civil War and highlights the ways those experiences affected the Great Migration and African American life in the North. It explores the economic and political conditions, including segregation, inequality, and injustice that encouraged the migration. Most of all, it shows the ways that people like Clara and Robert took action, transforming their lives as they headed for the, quote, promised land, even though the North wasn't that. The Robert Horton character in Up South was a real person. He was a barber from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who moved to Chicago in 1917. He was interviewed by sociologist Charles Johnson. And in that interview, Horton talked about his role in the Great Migration. Clara Robinson was not a real person, but she is a composite character based on the lives of many African American women who played key roles in mobilizing their families for the move north. She's a combination of real women. Robert and Clara's stories help us understand what it was like to take part in the Great Migration and build new lives. Through them, we can see how the actions of individuals can influence others, build mass movements, and bring about profound change in the history of an entire nation.